The storm came in like it had something to say, loud, slow, and mean. Wind scraped across the prairie like claws dragging through dry wheat. Rain hit the roof in heavy sheets, angry and relentless. Out past the ridge, thunder cracked once then again, like the sky was trying to remember something it had once lost. Jebediah Rowe sat alone inside the cabin he'd built with his own hands, a fire low in the hearth and a kettle rattling softly beside it. It had been years since anyone knocked on his door. Folks didn't come this far up the trail unless they were running from something or looking to bury it. Then it came. 3 knocks. Not loud but quick. Nervous, like they were afraid the sound might get them caught. He stood slowly hand-brushing the Winchester that hung above the mantel. He opened the door, and the wind answered first, wet, sharp cold as the river in March. Then he saw the boy. Couldn't have been more than 7. No shoes. Mud to his knees. A hat barely clung to his soaked hair and his face. Lord, his face looked like it had seen things no child should ever see. Eyes too old, too tired, burning with something that wasn't fear, but something close. "Sir," the boy said, barely louder than the wind. "My mama's in the woods." Jeb said nothing, just looked. "They're coming back tonight," the boy added, voice cracking. "If you don't help, they'll kill her." It wasn't the words that moved Jeb's hand to the doorframe. It was the boy's voice. The way it sounded like a memory, like someone he thought he'd buried years ago. His fingers touched the oilskin coat, then brushed the butt of the rifle. He didn't ask where or who. He didn't ask why. He just said, "Come in." And when the boy stepped through the threshold, soaked and shaking, something in Jebediah Rowe's life, something he thought long dead, began to stir again. The woods behind the cabin weren't kind that night. Branches clawed at their coats like they were trying to pull them back into the storm. The boy, whose name turned out to be Caleb, led Jeb through deer trails and soaked ravines, his little hands clenched into fists, his jaw set like a man twice his size. He said nothing after that first plea, just walked fast and without fear, like he knew the land better than it knew itself. They reached a hollow tucked beneath a bluff, shielded by wild shrubs and a spill of broken rock. The wind howled and lightning threw their shadows long against the trees. That's when Jeb saw her. She was curled under an overhang of stone, wrapped in what looked like a torn blanket and a man's shirt far too big for her frame. One leg stuck out bandaged in something that might have been linen once, but now looked like blood and rain. Her hair was dark and matted cheeks, hollow skin the color of dusk. She didn't move, not even when Jeb raised the lantern higher. Then she opened her eyes, and the world stopped. Jeb staggered back half a step, nearly dropping the lantern. Those eyes, he'd seen them once before, across firelight the night he'd slipped a silver band onto a young woman's wrist and told her he'd build her a home. That woman's name had been Delilah. And she'd died screaming somewhere between a burning village and a bullet meant for someone else. But these weren't Delilah's eyes. Not exactly. They were softer around the edges, wounded, not wild. But the shape, the depth, they were the same. And they locked onto him like a hand reaching up from under 6 feet of earth. "Jebediah," the woman rasped. He froze. She tried to sit, but her leg gave out. He caught her before she hit the ground, the rifle sliding off his shoulder and clattering against stone. She was cold, so light it felt like holding smoke. And still she held his gaze. "It's me," she said, voice trembling. "Mariah?" Jeb's breath caught in his chest like a knife. Mariah. Delilah's younger sister. The girl who used to laugh like thunderclaps in spring. He hadn't seen her since the raid, since they buried what was left of Delilah by the riverbank and scattered the ashes of a life never lived. He'd thought Mariah dead too, burned or taken, Lost forever. You're not supposed to be here. He said the words escaping before he knew what they meant. I didn't plan to be. Caleb was crouched beside them now, arms wrapped around his knees, watching with those same burning eyes. Marija looked to him, then back at Jeb. He's not mine, she said softly. His mother was a friend, a healer. She died this past spring. Jeb studied the boy again. His jaw, his hands the tilt of his head. None of it looked like her. But the way he stayed close, the way he hovered near the woman, like her pain was his own, that looked like family. How long's he been with you? Since the rains. He nodded once, though the storm inside him hadn't let up. He wanted to ask more, wanted to demand an explanation for why this woman had appeared out of nowhere dragging a child and 1,000 ghosts behind her. But the truth was, he didn't need it. Not really. Because around her wrist, beneath the torn sleeve of her shirt, glinted something silver. He reached forward without thinking, brushing the fabric aside. A bracelet. Thin. Worn. Etched with 2 feathered lines that met in the center. Delilah's. He still had the other one, wrapped in cloth, tucked away in the bottom drawer of his desk like a relic too sacred to touch. She gave it to me, Marija whispered. The night the flames came. She shoved me toward the back of the lodge and said, "Run. If you live, take this. It's proof I mattered." Jeb looked at her hand, then at the boy, then at the sky above them, split again by lightning. She did matter, he said. Marija blinked hard. She still does. Without another word, Jeb lifted her into his arms. Caleb stood without being asked, taking the lantern. Together, they walked back through the storm, through the trees, through time itself. And when they crossed the threshold of Jebediah Rowe's cabin, something changed. Not in the walls, not in the fire, but in the silence between 3 people who had all lost someone. And maybe, just maybe, we're about to find something worth holding on to. The storm didn't quit that night. It just settled into something steadier, like grief when it's done raging. A steady rhythm of rain tapped the windows, quiet and persistent, like it was trying to be let in. Jeb carried Marija into the cabin and laid her gently on the cot by the hearth. Caleb hovered close, but not too close, like a child who had learned that sometimes even love could bruise. Marija's face was pale, her skin chilled. He stoked the fire, added more wood, and brought water to boil. The wound in her thigh was ugly. Torn deep, but not infected, at least not yet. "Bullet?" he asked, kneeling beside her with a basin of warm water. She nodded, a glancing one. He cleaned it in silence, the way he used to clean his saddle, steady, unflinching, deliberate. She winced, her fingers gripping the cot's edge, but she didn't cry out. Jeb noticed that. Not many people bled quiet. Only the ones who'd done it before. After he stitched her up and wrapped the leg in fresh linen, he stepped back and sat across the room. His rifle leaned beside him. Caleb had curled up near the stove, wrapped in an old wool blanket, already half asleep. Marija broke the silence first. Her voice came low, almost cautious. "My name's not Marija anymore." He looked up. No, I mean, it still is. But when I crossed the river into Arizona, I started using Anna. Shorter, less dangerous." Jeb's jaw shifted, but he said nothing. "I didn't come here for you," she added, softer now. "I came because Caleb remembered the well. Said his mama once met a woman who lived near a stone well with a tin roof and a dog named Brisket." Jeb exhaled slowly. "Delilah. She fed them when no one else would." That's all he remembered. "I didn't think it was you." "Not really. Not until I saw your eyes." He looked away, stared into the fire like it might answer something he wasn't ready to ask. After a while, he walked to the drawer near the hearth and pulled out a cloth bundle. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a second silver bracelet, identical to the one around her wrist. He placed it on the table between them. Side by side, they looked like halves of a story no one ever finished telling. Mariah reached out but didn't touch it. Her voice shook. I thought she made it out. I waited 2 days in the rocks. Thought maybe the smoke would clear, that anyone would come. They didn't, Jeb said. I found what was left, buried it myself. She looked at him, eyes full of memory and something heavier than sorrow. She saved me. She saved me too, he replied. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft crackle of the fire, and Caleb's breath, steady now, like sleep, had loosened its grip on his fear. Then hoofbeats. 3 of them. Slow, deliberate, measured like the march of lawmen or worse. Jeb stood motion smooth and practiced. He walked to the window, pulled the curtain just enough to glimpse the edge of the trail. 3 riders. Uniforms mismatched, half cavalry, half county. One wore a brass badge pinned crooked to his chest. The kind of badge you didn't earn so much as inherit from a man meaner than you. He turned. Get under the hay in the barn. Now. Mariah didn't ask questions. She tried to stand. Her leg buckled, but she caught herself on the wall. Caleb rushed to her side. Jeb grabbed his coat and led them out the back. The barn was dark and dry, the hay piled high in the corner. He covered them fast sacks, old feed bags, a canvas tarp. Then he slipped back into the house. By the time the riders knocked, he already had a kettle on the stove and a rifle within arm's reach. The man with the badge leaned against the post like he owned the rein. You Jebediah Rowe? Jeb nodded once. Used to be. Word is you rode patrol back in '72. That was a long time ago. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Still, you seem the type who notices strangers. I notice weather. The rest don't linger long enough to matter. We're looking for someone. Jeb raised a brow. Native woman, slim, might have a boy with her. Why? She's wanted. Aiding fugitives. The boy's dangerous. Jeb didn't flinch. 7 years old. Bit of corporal, drew blood. That'll leave a mark. The younger one stepped forward. Mind if we look around? I do. You hiding something? I value my privacy. That's still legal, ain't it? The lead rider looked toward the barn. Got kids out here? Nope. Then he paused. Near the well, something caught his eye. A footprint, small, fresh. Jeb saw it too. His stomach dropped. The man knelt beside it. What's this? Jeb moved fast, too fast. He yelped, dropped the kettle, scalding water spilling over his boot. Damn it, he roared, staggering back. The men rushed to him. You all right? Burned myself, he hissed, tugging off the boot. The skin was already red. You want a doctor? I've had worse. The moment passed. The boot print forgotten. The men stepped back, mounted up. The badge turned in the saddle. If you see anything, I'll let the wind know, Jeb said. When they were gone, he slumped against the doorframe, breathing slow and ragged. Inside the barn, beneath a blanket of hay and silence, Caleb peeked through a crack in the wood. Mariah placed a hand on the boy's back. Didn't speak, didn't need to. The boy's eyes said everything. That night, long after the riders were gone, and the fire had burned low, I sat on the edge of Jeb's old cot, listening to the rain slide off the roof, like it was trying to wash the world clean. Caleb had fallen asleep beside the stove, curled up in a wool blanket that smelled of cedar and dust. Jeb hadn't said much since the soldiers left. Just grunted as he cleaned his burned foot, then sat in silence, staring into the flames. He hadn't asked why I came. Not really. But I saw it in his eyes, the question he didn't speak. So I answered it. I never meant to bring trouble, I said softly. He didn't look away from the fire. Trouble finds you whether you ask for it or not. I know. He reached for the kettle with slow, steady hands and poured water into a tin cup. The way he moved, like someone who'd spent a long time getting used to being careful, told me all I needed to know. He'd lived alone too long. I told him everything. About the night they found me in the rocks right after the raid. Men, not soldiers, not really, but white men with torches and mouths full of hate. They said I looked like something they could trade. Maybe for supplies, maybe for worse. I ran when I could, crawled through cactus and stone until my palms bled and my dress tore into ribbons. When I finally made it to the river, I was nothing but bones and dirt and pain. And still, my own people turned from me. They said I should have died with the others, I whispered. Jeb said nothing, just stared into the fire like it owed him something. To return wounded, I added, from the hands of a white man. They said I was no better than a dog who lost its pack. My voice didn't break. It had broken long ago. Now it was just worn thin. I wandered for months, I said. Didn't speak to anyone for days at a time. Slept in trees, slept under wagons, ate what didn't move too fast. Then one day I found her. Caleb's mother. Fever had taken half her strength. I carried water for her. She gave me a name again. Jeb looked up at that. She called me sister. And when she died, I buried her myself. His eyes softened just a little. And Caleb, he asked. He followed me like a shadow. I tried to leave him once. Left food by a tree and walked until I couldn't hear him cry anymore. Took me 3 days to stop shaking. When I went back, he was still sitting there, holding the bracelet. She didn't leave it to me, not exactly. She just pressed it into my hand the night she died. Said, "This is for when you can't run anymore." Jeb closed his eyes, and for a moment we sat in that quiet, broken space between two people who'd once loved the same woman and who now carried different pieces of her ghost. Later that afternoon, Caleb helped Jeb split kindling. I watched from the porch, one hand on my leg, the other on the door frame, steadying myself. And then I saw it. That small moment. Jeb had paused, axe still in hand, watching as I knelt beside Caleb near the shed. I was showing him how to strike flint, how to let the blade spark without forcing it. My hands guided his. He looked up at me with that wide-eyed trust only children give when they're not used to having it returned. He smiled when the spark caught. I smiled too. And maybe that smile was too long, too soft. Maybe it wasn't survival anymore. Maybe it was love. Not the kind you choose. The kind that chooses you whether you're ready or not. When I glanced back, Jeb had turned away. But I could still feel him watching. That night, the rain came again. Softer this time, like forgiveness. Inside, Jeb sat by the hearth, carving notches into a block of pine with his pocket knife. One for each winter since Delilah died, I guessed. I crouched near the coals, coaxing the fire to life. He didn't say anything at first, but then almost like a breath he spoke. "You're not her." I didn't flinch, I know. "But you have her fire." I smiled faintly. "We shared a womb. Some things stay." He didn't smile back, but he didn't look away either. And for him, I knew that was enough. Dawn broke in silence. The storm had passed, but its shadow lingered. Mud pooled along the porch steps, and the wind still carried a dampness that clung to the bones. I watched Jeb from the corner of the cabin. As he strapped his saddle, his movements slower than usual. The burn on his foot had begun to blister, but he said nothing about it. He just tightened the cinch and checked the rifle twice. We both knew what the silence meant. They'd come back. That badge wasn't crooked by accident, it tilted like the man who wore it. A man who didn't knock to ask, but to corner. We hadn't bought ourselves peace. Only time. I should go, I said, standing by the door, one hand already gripping my bag. Jeb didn't turn. You'll be tracked. I'll move fast. Not with that leg. I'll carry him if I have to. His hands paused at the saddle horn. And then what teach him to run his whole life? I didn't answer right away, because I had no answer worth saying. That evening, I found Caleb sitting by the woodpile, watching a bug crawl across his palm. He looked up at me like he knew. Children always do. I brushed his hair behind his ear and told him to pack light. We waited until the moon was high. The sky stretched open clear for the first time in days. I moved through the cabin without sound, folding the blanket, tying the flint pouch, wrapping bits of food in cloth. Jeb sat at the table, carving slow into that same block of pine. I didn't tell him goodbye. He didn't ask for it. But as I reached for the latch, he spoke. You don't have to go. I froze. He stood slowly, not rushing it, not pleading, just steady. Not because of the past, he added, and not because of her. Because of what's in front of me now. When I turned, he was looking at me, really looking. Not like I was her sister, not like I was a ghost, but like I was someone he might choose. For the first time. It's not because you remind me of something I lost, he said. It's because you make me feel like something could begin. I didn't say anything, but I stepped closer. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folded map, spread it across the table like it was hope itself. There's a trail, he said. South, hidden, narrow. If we leave before sunup, we can reach the pass before they know we're gone. You'd leave all this? He looked around. At the worn saddle, the empty hooks, the hearth, the picture frame that no longer held a face. I already have. So we left. We rode out before dawn. Jeb led the way, Caleb in front of me, arms wrapped tight around my middle. The trail was, as he'd said, thin and forgotten, winding through cliffs and shale. He'd once chased a thief through these canyons. Now, we were the ones being chased. By midday, we reached a shaded alcove. Stopped to water the horse. The sun sliced through the granite like spears of judgment. Caleb drank quietly. I watched the ridge. Too late. A shot cracked sharp and high. The horse reared. Jeb grabbed the reins and pulled us into cover as another shot rang out. They found us, he growled. 3 riders appeared above rifles drawn. The one with the crooked badge led them, his voice smug. You're running with fugitives now, Cole. Jeb said nothing. His eyes scanned the bend ahead, tight, slick, dangerous. 1/2 mile, he muttered. There's a slide path. I can use it. He mounted. Follow me. We bolted. The path twisted beneath us. Shale slipped under hooves. Bullets chased shadows. One struck the cliff. Another snapped air beside my head. Caleb screamed, but I held him tighter. Then Jeb shouted, pointing to the ridge. There, above the bend. See that shelf of rock? I did, loose and crumbling. Cut right. Take the boy. Do not stop. I looked at him. I won't leave you. You will, or he won't make it. My throat clenched, but I nodded. He veered toward the ridge, dismounted hard, and scrambled up the slope. Behind him, the riders pressed closer. He reached the post's old traps rigged long ago and yanked the rope. The ridge groaned, then collapsed. Dust, stone, chaos. Horses screamed. 2 men were thrown. One barely ducked behind a boulder in time. The canyon choked on its own breath. But just as Jeb turned to run, a shot rang out. I saw him stagger. His shoulder caught the bullet. He fell to one knee, gripping his side, blood blooming fast beneath his coat. Elijah, I cried his name, finally real in my throat. I didn't think. I turned, the horse rode straight toward him. Caleb still clung to me. Jeb waved us off, but I didn't stop. You're hit. I've got another arm, he growled. He pulled himself up behind me, blood dripping down his sleeve. And we rode. Fast, hard, away from everything that wanted to end us. By nightfall, we crossed into the borderlands. The air smelled of pine and riverstone. The land was quieter there, like even danger knew when to rest. Behind us, the canyon fell into silence. And beside me, Jeb leaned forward, breath shallow. But he was still holding on. "You came back," he rasped. "You were worth the bullet," I said. And for the first time in years, I believed it. The town didn't have a name on any map. Just a cluster of clay buildings sunken into the edge of desert and pine. A one-room church, a schoolhouse with windows that caught the morning light, a general store that smelled of flour and leather. No one asked questions there. No one cared much where you came from, as long as you pulled your weight and left the past at the edge of the valley. We arrived just after the wound in Jeb's shoulder stopped bleeding, but before the pain ever really settled. He slept for 2 days in a borrowed room behind the livery, his breath shallow, his shirt stained with dried blood. I sat beside him with a wet cloth, waiting for his body to decide if it still wanted to stay. It did. By the end of the week, he was splitting wood again, slower than before, favoring his left side but alive. Caleb ran through the dust after wild chicken's laughter in his mouth, like he'd never swallowed fear. I found work at the schoolhouse. They needed hands. I could read, I could listen, and I could make children believe they mattered. That was more than enough. Sometimes I'd glance up from the chalkboard and catch Jeb outside the window, leaning against the fence post, watching. He never waved. Just stood there. Quiet. Solid. Like a tree that grew where no one thought roots could take. At night, I packed small things into shelves. I stitched Caleb's clothes. He drew animals on scrap paper. Jeb carved handles for the store. Slowly, we let our silence build a rhythm. We didn't call it family. We didn't dare. But it felt like something growing steady and unspoken. One night, I walked in and found him at the hearth. He was holding a letter, yellowed, creased, his name on the front in his own handwriting. He read it aloud, not to me, not really, just into the room, like the words had waited too long. "Dear Delilah, Ashokya," he began, voice low, "I do not know where you are. Maybe nowhere. Maybe just inside the part of me that still believes you might walk through our door again. I miss you in a way I can't say without breaking something." He paused, swallowed. "I built you a fence," he said. "Never told you that. After you were gone, I built it so the wind wouldn't take everything. But it still did." Then he looked up. "Today I met someone with your eyes," he whispered. "But she's not you. She's something else. Someone I think, if I dared, I could call home." He folded the letter, walked to the hearth, and placed it in the fire. I didn't stop him. I just stood there. Let the flames eat what the past had left behind. The next morning, Caleb ran across the yard, arms wide, and leapt into Jeb's arms. "Papa," he laughed. Jeb caught him midair, a soft grunt escaping his chest as the boy pressed his face against his shoulder. "You're getting heavy," he said. "Miss Ayana says I read better than everyone now. Better than me. Way better." I stepped outside, satchel and hand papers spilling from the edge, and smiled. "You're letting him win again," I teased. "Only fair," Jeb said. "He's younger." Caleb ran off to chase a dragonfly. I stood beside Jeb, our hands brushing once, then settling together, like they'd always known how. He looked at me, not searching, not comparing, just seeing, and in his eyes there were no ghosts anymore. Just light, soft, honest, quiet as the desert wind. He whispered, "We don't belong anywhere." "No," I said. "But if we're together, maybe that's enough to call it home." He looked at the boy laughing in the dust, then nodded once, then let stay. And just like that we did. Not because it was safe, not because it was easy, but because sometimes the only thing more powerful than running from the past is choosing to stay where love is quietly waiting to be built. Some nights when the wind shifts just right and the coyotes sing down in the gulch, I still remember how it felt the first time Caleb called him Papa. It wasn't a grand moment, no lightning in the sky, no music playing soft in the background. It was quiet, simple, real. He'd fallen in the dirt chasing a grasshopper, scraped his palm, and walked straight to Jeb with his lip trembling, but his pride still holding. Held out his hand like he didn't know how to ask. And Jeb, without saying a word, knelt down, blew the dust away, and tied a strip of linen around it. "Thank you," Papa Caleb whispered. And Jeb, he didn't flinch, didn't correct him, just rested a hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "You're welcome, son." That's the moment everything changed. Not just for Caleb, for all of us. Later that evening, I found Jeb by the shed sharpening his old knife. I stood beside him for a long while, neither of us speaking. Then he said almost to the wind, "I didn't think I'd get a second chance. Not at this age. Not after that much loss." I looked at him, his face lined from years of silence and hard weather, and I said, "You didn't get a second chance. You made one." He nodded. And maybe that was the most healing thing of all. Not that we found each other, but that we chose each other. In a world that had taken so much land, love, blood, language, we still had the right to choose. To build. To begin. Sometimes family isn't where you're born. It's where someone kneels in the dust, wraps your wound without question, and stays. It's not built in blood or law, but in moments. Small ones. A whispered name. A shared fire. A hand reaching back when you thought you'd been left behind. If you've ever lost something that mattered, and still believed even quietly that love might come again, then maybe you know what we felt out there on that nameless stretch of prairie. And maybe, just maybe, there's still a place in this wild, broken world for second chances. If this story stirred something in you, tell us in the comments. Whether it's a memory, a name, or just a quiet thank you to someone who never gave up on you, we'd be honored to read it. And if you believe stories like this still matter, subscribe to Wild West Soul. We'll be waiting out here under open skies with one more story to keep your heart warm till morning comes.